Our 3 Cents is part of the Greenlit Podcast Network. For more information, please go to greenlitpodcasts.com. Hello and welcome to Our 3 Cents, a weekly podcast celebrating the very finest video games. My name is Jonathan Dunn and I am joined by my childhood friend Chris Dow.
Monster Energy.
And my adulthood friend Minty Booth.
Well, there's no need to shout.
This week we're taking another break from counting down our top 10 favourite video games of all time, and we're bringing you a super special bonus episode looking at some games that have you set down the controller, put away the mouse and fully embrace the 26 letters plus punctuation at your fingertips in keyboard-based typing and text games. And we are thrilled to welcome to the show Peyton and Ben from RNG Party, whose recent release, the typing adventure Backspace Bouken, has featured on the podcast and particularly captured the imaginations of these 3 gamers. So welcome Peyton and welcome Ben.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Yep. So to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what games you're currently playing? Peyton, why don't you take us away?
Sure. I guess first of all, a little bit about myself. I am an attorney in my day job. RNG Party is something that Ben, my friend Jake, and I started years ago as a sort of a hobby. We were glad to actually release a game, but I do, I do have a day job. And then as far as games I've been currently playing, I've been playing a lot of Digimon Cyber Sleuth on Switch. That's been a lot of my time. I recently received my PlayStation 2 back from Ben, where it had been stored in his apartment for some time. And I was playing some of the classic Digimon RPGs for PlayStation. And then I was like, why don't I play Digimon Cyber Sleuth? And then I got it, and I'm really enjoying it. And then I've also been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3 on Steam.
Ooh,
sort of a mindless activity. But I'm a sucker for grand strategy games, so that's been a lot of fun too.
Have you managed to form a society that eats their own king? Because I've heard that's something... That was kind of how the game was sold to me.
I've not been able to make a cannibalistic society yet. I almost did a couple times, but haven't quite gotten there yet.
It's the sort of thing I'm sure it's surprisingly easy to do accidentally.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly looking at the way that British politics is going,
You can't move for people accidentally eating the monarchy.
Exactly. And you know what? We're going to have the last laugh when we do our 2021 retrospective episode, and I'll cut this sample in, and everyone will be like...
Which member of the ruling class do you think will be the tastiest?
How about you, Ben?
I have a Japanese exclusive handheld called the Wonder Swan.
Ooh,
I've been playing Chocobo's Dungeon on that.
What a nerd.
It's like a mystery dungeon game,
They
though.
got an English translation not that long ago, didn't it?
I think it did,
As a ROM hack, yeah.
I'm not playing it, but yeah.
Are you playing this in Japanese?
Yes, I am.
Do you speak Japanese?
I can read a little bit of it. I can speak even less, but I can read enough that I can get through it.
That's pretty cool. I managed to do that. I remember when I got an early... It must have been one of the Pokemon games that came out in Japan first. And I was like, to be fair, obviously, Pokemon games have been exactly the same for 30 years or however long they've been going.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to know what's going on unless, you really want to find out about a young boy wearing shorts, enjoying his shorts.
Which, best bit of dialogue.
It's certainly something. Definitely the translator phoning in that day. Like, oh god, the match is on it like in 5 minutes. Right, I like my shorts. I like bugs. Right, there we go. That's all of Route 2 done. What's next? So we'll come on to talk about RNG Party and the work you've been doing in a bit. But before we do that, we have each prepared a memory of a particular text or typing based game from the archives of our gaming memories that we'd love to share with you. So Ben, why don't you kick us off with a particular memory of a game that revolved around text or typing?
Well, pretty much the only major one I've played is Typing of the Dead when I was growing up on my parents' computer. I pretty much learned typing with that game.
There we go.
So I don't type very, very well, but it's really fun.
I mean, it's a great game. I'm going to talk a little bit about Typing of the Dead Overkill a little later on. But one of the things while I was trying to do research for this episode, the only way I could find games that were based around typing is by using the search term edutainment, as in educational entertainment.
Yep.
So I'm sure, because it is still so niche.
Yeah.
So it's good that you learnt typing from that. I'm sure that, whoever started coming up with the ideas for edutainment software would be very pleased to know that it did serve some use.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Peyton? What are some of the text or typing games that stuck out to you in the years past?
Sure. So I never played Typing of the Dead, but I did play like you said, edutainment game called Jumpstart Typing, which is literally just a game that's just a series of mini games revolve around typing. One involves snowboarding. Basically, just the memory of having my mom booted up on the computer so I could just play a game. I didn't have a lot of video games growing up, so stuff like that was sort of the only experience I had with video gaming at an early age was learning games, and specifically this typing one. I did not teach me how to type. I am a very poor typist, but I enjoyed it.
Ah, the irony! Fantastic. I've just googled some pictures of it now, and it's so painfully 90s.
Oh yeah.
Like, literally, if you say to anybody, imagine the 90s. And then Google an image from Jumpstart Typing. Those two images are exactly the same.
Yeah, one you had to type characters to climb up like a stone wall, and then the one you snowboard, and it's just a lot of fun, for a 4-year-old.
Absolutely, it looks like exactly the sort of game that if that were installed on like a school computer, I'd be like, guys, you won't believe this. The best thing has happened. The best thing has happened. I found this game. It was like I remember there was some. I think it was on the Encarta encyclopedia software. There was like a vague game you could play where you like explored a castle, but then you had to answer questions based on stuff that you would learn using the Encarta encyclopedia, and that was like, that was an entire IT lesson right there. It's like we've broken the system with one. Chris, how about you? What are some of the typing or text-based games that you've got any particular memories of?
Well, because I was a console kid for basically my whole childhood. I didn't get a home computer till I was at secondary school, so when I was like 11 or 12. I don't have many like super early memories of text or that sort of command-based game. And even the friend I've mentioned on here a few times, I used to go to his house, and his parents were network operators or something, so there was always computers there. I played Doom with him, I played Command and Conquer, I played Jazz Jack Rabbit, I messed around on Coral Draw, all these different things, but he never showed me any text adventures either, like any of those kind of classic text adventures. None of my family or friends at the time had a Spectrum. They didn't have an Amiga. No one had a Commodore 64. So there was none of that late 80s, early 90s home computing stuff that I had access to. And I suppose that the closest thing I could say fits this bill is that when I did visit that PC-owning friend, I had to learn how to operate MS-DOS.
Oh, wow.
And, which is kind of like a text-based game in itself, especially for someone who wasn't yet computer savvy.
Yeah.
So, working out how you get between directories or mount drives or load executables and everything else, it did feel like I was in the Matrix, shifting up and down and doing everything else. But, thinking about it, the Matrix wouldn't be a cultural marker for like another 5, 6, 7 years at that point. So I was ahead of the Matrix, if anything. I think the Wachowskis were cribbing from me. I think I was just a text-based heathen in that respect. Like, give me a happy little sprite that could jump around on baddies' heads, and I was golden.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very, very little until, like we just talked about, I did play Typing of the Dead on the Dreamcast years later, but that was when I was in my mid-20s. I think I picked up a copy of that. So we're... Yeah, a long time between kind of like thinking about these sort of games and actually playing one.
Talking about MS-DOS, I remember having a copy of Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker.
Great game.
It's a very, very good game. One of the things I remember about that game is if you took too long or you took a while to consider your shot, then little flies would start appearing on the table. And I always thought that was like sci-fi level detail. I couldn't believe there was that sort of sophistication in the code. For me, though, I've got a real just striking memory of, I think, the epitome of edutainment games. And it was on a machine that I didn't realise was so sort of, I guess, notorious until fairly recently, which was the BBC Micro computer.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
Now, I imagine that they didn't make it over to the US.
I had no idea what you're talking about, so.
I don't think they did. I'm aware of them, but I don't think they did.
I'm sure there must have been something similar. I remember us having one in the corner of Mrs. Hogwood's classroom at Callis Grange Infant School, which was Orange class. And I'm sure that is probably the most stereotypically British sentence you've ever heard, guys. So this BBC microcomputer had one particular game on it, and it became the obsession of everyone. You know, everyone was like, right, if I finish first on this maths text or whatever, that means I might get to go on the computer and play Granny's Garden.
Oh,
and does that stirs something, doesn't it? It stirs something in the reptilian part of your brain.
I feel like my school or my primary school had a BBC Micro as well, and I can't have used it more than once or twice my entire time at school. But Granny's Garden, now that you've mentioned it, I'm sure is like this latent nightmare image in the back of my mind from that time.
And it is a nightmare of a game. I mean, it's got obviously very, very stark graphics. And yeah, you explore it through typing commands and then sort of remembering certain things that you pick up and try and find your way through Granny's Garden without getting killed by the witch, who I think was Granny. I don't know. I mean, it certainly is in my memory. But absurdly, that game got a port to iOS in 2014.
Did it?
It did, yeah. And there was a time when I was providing the AV support for an event up in North Wales, and I was sat in the control room, obviously 100% focused on the job, and recollected Granny's Garden. And I thought, right, there must be a way to play it, or at least I could Google it and find out some more stuff about it. And I remember being absolutely thrilled because not only did I find more information about it, I downloaded it, and also I wasn't morbidly hungover like my colleagues were, whilst I then sat with near perfect vision playing through it. And I'm glad. I think the combination of an obscure text-based adventure, the repressed memories of a 6-year-old child with the beer fear, that is probably not a cocktail I wanted to indulge in whilst stuck in a small space in North Wales. But I was thrilled that I managed to play through it. It literally took me about 14 minutes, I think, to play through the whole thing. It was ridiculous, it was absurd, it was surreal, there was a talking toadstool, and it was terrifying. And I'm glad to I'll be very glad after today to put it back into my memory for it to stay. How about you, Minty?
Well, a dear friend from high school sent me a Gmud client over MSN Messenger in 2004, which is a date rendered useless by the context of the broader sentence. He gave me the server information for the Discworld MUD. I'd never read a Discworld book, and at that point, the world of PC gaming was limited to Doom and demos that came with copies of PC World magazine. Our computer could just about handle being hooked up to a printer at that point, and that was all that was needed in our utilitarian household. I've talked about how the game was initially borderline insurmountable to someone who was used to just sort of jumping towards the right-hand side of a screen and swinging a sword at a massive pig for years on ends, which eventually gave way to a wonderfully edifying experience, not only through teaching me to get better at typing, but also reading the Discworld books and playing with my friends. I think on average, and we did work this out, the 5 of us that played regularly in our little group, by the time that we left high school, we had spent an average about 1% of our lives playing this game, which I think text-based games are great for multiplayer. Your controller has everything that you need to communicate with somebody without having to worry about things like dead air, like you would with voice chat. Like any lull in conversation is remedied by just typing, tell Cronthor, sorry, just killing a troll, lol. Something really slick and satisfying about having your P2P controls aligned with the controls for the game you're actually playing. It's utterly seamless. I think more games should use typing as a mechanic outside of key bindings. Let's imagine like a hack and slash game, for example. Type in cut, and you do 5 damage. Type in lacerate, and that's 30 damage. You unlock more spaces for letters as you progress through the game. A signpost tells you that longer words do more damage. Suddenly, next to your console, there's a thesaurus with every single page dog-eared. I honestly think that typing games are great for personal development, and I attribute my vocabulary to spending so long playing games that necessitate that skill. There's a good 40 buttons on a keyboard, and it's high time for typing to become a beloved mechanic instead of a quirk. And I'm very excited to have Ben and Peyton here, 2 men who should know. join us today to put typing games on a more elevated platform.
You would think.
As an aside, I told my wife that we were talking about typing games today, and she said, "Oh, Mavis Beacon."
Yeah, that is. I've gotten that before.
So, over to you, Ben and Peyton. You've heard about some of your experiences with typing, or lack thereof. How did RNG Party come about? And Backspace Bouken in particular. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the company, and how did you find your way then to developing typing-based adventure Backspace Bouken?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about RNG Party, and then I'll let Ben explain Backspace Bouken and the reason why it will become clear. Ben and I met in college.
Right.
He was the year before me. We lived in the same dorm, and both of us had a love for video games and a lot of things in common. And I introduced him to some of my friends from high school who were very much into the Pokemon games, and that's where we did a lot of our bonding was over Pokemon. Once I graduated, I decided I want to make something and sort of do something, and I talked to Ben about it. I know Ben had been working on a game, and I said, hey, let's do this together and see if we can't come up with something. That game was garbage, which led us to the realization that I know nothing and Ben knows very little about programming. So we brought in our friend Jake, who goes to school for computer science and is a programming whiz.
Pretty much, yeah.
So the three of us then started working on this game. We realized it was still garbage. So we scrapped that project, scrapped some other projects, and then there was a game jam that Jake and Ben did, and I didn't because I had a job.
Yeah, so we did Ludum Dare 42, I think it was. It's a 3-day game jam, and I think the theme for that one was...
It was running out of space, right?
Yeah, it was running out of space. That's what it was.
Oh, wow.
And so we were like brainstorming with friends just like on Discord, and one of our friends was like, well, what if you made it like actual physical spaces, like the space bar on the keyboard that you ran out of? And that got our minds going. We were like, all right, let's make a typing game. And we were playing through a obscure dungeon crawler called Mado Monogatari. It's where the Puyo Puyo series comes from.
Oh, yeah.
We were like, all right, let's just fuse these two things because we really, really liked that game. So we jammed out Backspace Bouken like just in 3 days over the course of that game jam.
The original, which was one floor?
Yeah.
I think it was 3 floors. It was up to what's his name? Carboniferous, the boss. And then people really liked it once we did it. So we were like, all right, let's see if we can just make this a game.
This will be the actual game that we've been trying to make for 2 years and have been failing to actually make a game.
A year and a half later, we did it. Came out.
That's so good. That's great.
Throughout that whole time, I was a teacher, and then I went to law school.
Yeah.
So I was very busy. So I tangentially assisted where I could, which was basically with the art to some extent. But Ben made almost all the art, did all the music, and then Jake did, I think, all the programming and most of the script writing.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's a fantastic achievement. I mean, me and Chris, when we were kids growing up, we used to dabble with making games using the Games Factory. I mean, obviously they were dreadful.
Yeah, they were.
I work as a professional creative now, and I look back at some of the early stuff I did creatively. Obviously, it's crap, but everything you make, as long as you learn from it, means that the next thing you do will be better until you start to make stuff that you're sort of consistently pleased with.
Our first game has some high class art. I will say, Ben and I actually worked hard on that art. It's another pixel art based game, but it looks nice. It just does not work.
It was supposed to be like a narrative game, so we were trying to go that route first. But yeah, it was like a lot of art and not a lot else. So that's why we ended up canceling it.
We recently cranked out another game in a game jam where I was actually able to join Ben and Jake for the first time, I think, since we've done one, all the three of us. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much I was actually able to to assist.
It worked out
doing the
really
artwork,
well, yeah.
which freed up Ben to do a lot of the music and sound effects, as well as that game is 3D to some extent, so it had some 3D modeling too. But
nice.
That game's also garbage, so check it out. If you want.
It's not that bad.
all aboard. It was Ludum Dare 47. What was that, Ben? I don't remember which one it was.
40. Yeah, I think it's 47.
I must say, I am a really, really big fan of the music in Backspace Bouken.
Thank
It's
you.
superb. I love chiptune music when it's done well, and it was very atmospheric. There were some really, really good tunes. I think in my review of it on the episode, I spoke about the underwater level reminding me a bit of Aquatic Ambience track from Donkey Kong Country, which is it's a great track.
That was probably in the back of my head, that song specifically at the time.
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, like nothing sounds like underwater like that one.
Yeah, it's so good.
When I went snorkeling on the coral reef on my honeymoon, that was playing in my head.
Nice.
I'm sure, maybe the fish was singing it to me. Maybe not. Maybe I had heat stroke. So, if you've listened to a particular couple of episodes in the recent smattering of episodes, you will have heard mine and Chris's thoughts on Backspace Bouken. Most recently, in the episode centred around Minty's 10th favourite video game, I gave a full rundown of my impression of it. And if you dredge up season 2 of this show, you can find the episode featuring our 14th favourite video games. You can hear Chris successfully pitch the game to me. Needless to say, we loved it. Hence, this episode. We praised the typing functionality, the overall tone of the game, the music, like I just said. We just had a great time with it, and it gives us great delight to bring you the third sense opinions of the game, as Minty has played through it in preparation for this episode today. So, Minty, what are your fresh impressions of your recent playthrough of Backspace Bouken?
Well, I love dungeon crawlers, and I love, even more specifically, diegetic tutorials. I don't think I saw anything outside the narrative that explained the game mechanics outside of asterisks chirping around and saying that they'll save your game here and there. Going in completely blind and being the person that's not terribly mindful of things, the first skeleton I encountered had me stumped a little. After typing things like hit, attack, and kill, I finally started mimicking them, and it was one of the biggest, oh, that's really cool, gaming moments that I've had in quite a long time, actually. We talked about mechanics that blew us away in a previous episode, and I really wanted to talk about this one, but I was embargoed until today by old Whip Cracker Dunn over there. But I really love how it puts greater stock on the dialogue in the game, particularly the transience of the signposts. Now, before I started to get a feel for the rhythm of combat and how often you'd run into enemies, I did leave a few signposts unbackspaced after reading them, because what if they contained deep lore that I'd need to fall back on? And then I realised that there was a journal where passwords and the like were jotted down, and for that we thank you. Playing around with the text in boss battles was fantastic as well. I got to the underwater floors and I thought, oh, I've suddenly become really shit at this game halfway through because I couldn't keep up with all the big words. And then looking a little closer, I saw that all the dialogue was full of fish puns, and that was the second "that's really cool" moment in the space of about an hour and a half. I'll admit that I did breeze through the first playthrough because we only have one computer in my house and my wife is writing her thesis at the moment. But there's more in there to make me want to go back and enjoy a more chilled and slower paced playthrough. I've got the bonus chapter in my sights on her next day off, and I'm really looking forward to it. I beat it in about 3 hours, and I really loved it all the way through. I think it's an excellent game.
Thank you.
The world record's 24 minutes, bud. So you better
speed up, Minty.
24 minutes.
Yeah.
There's we were really surprised when we put up our Discord for RNG Party, and a couple people joined. It was like, I speedrun your game, and we're like, what?
They're really good at it.
And they're really good. And the current world record holder is 24 minutes and 50 seconds.
That's insane.
That's nuts.
This is, I think on the hard difficulty without intentionally skipping any words, but it's something.
Man, oh man.
So, obviously, Backspace Bouken isn't the only typing-based game out there, but it's true to say that there hasn't been a wealth of them about. The first one I remember seeing that wasn't purely educational, like Granny's Garden, or the Learn French with Rayman game I managed to convince my my parents to buy for me. Ce n'était pas génial. But the first game that really used typing as a mechanic that I saw is one that we've already mentioned, Typing of the Dead, which is the absurd spin-off from the House of the Dead series, which is it's set up exactly like that game is in the arcade, but instead of firing a gun at the oncoming hordes of zombies, they have a word hovering over their heads, which when you successfully type it, it shoots them. Now, I think the game was actually released in the arcades in Japan, which is mental. I mean, just the germaphobe in me thinking of a full keyboard in an arcade makes me want to puke, but more people probably, I mean, probably not a lot more, but most people would have seen it first on the Dreamcast version that you mentioned, Chris, complete with keyboard peripheral. And then I think it was later ported to PS2 and obviously the PC. Something that I often challenge games with when I'm playing them, certainly when it comes to the implementation of certain mechanics, is simply why? Why does this mechanic need to be employed here? Is it simply a gimmick, or does it have a further use? We've seen a lot of that in recent years as consoles and controllers have integrated gyroscopic controls, microphone inputs, touchscreens, motion tracking cameras, all kinds of things. So if a game uses one of those features just as a gimmick, or simply because they can, I don't really see the worth in that. However, it's very difficult to justify why the mechanic of typing in Typing of the Dead warrants being there. Like, you can't intellectualize it too much. The written word is not massively indicative of a zombie horde, although, perhaps it is a seething satire on the state of modern sensationalist journalism. I don't know.
yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head.
The only defining reason why this functionality is built into the game is simply because it's fun. It's an absolute riot. It's something that captured my imagination massively. And I actually remember one of the first times that I properly met up with you, Chris, it had been quite a few years after we'd, gone our separate ways to uni and all of that. And I came to your place when you lived in Faversham, and I remember you having your retro room set up, particularly because you had a Saturn in there with the flash drive, and there was also a Dreamcast. And I asked you two questions. The first was, can we play Athlete Kings? Because that was always my priority. The answer was yes, followed by an hour or two of play. And then my second question was, do you have Typing of the Dead on the Dreamcast? The answer was yes, but not a compatible keyboard, I believe. But this was also in a time where the series had evolved, and a sequel entitled Typing of the Dead Overkill, a spin-off of, you guessed it, House of the Dead Overkill, was now easily available on Steam. And you told me about this, and I took great delight in downloading it that night and typing away into the small hours. And Typing of the Dead Overkill is an incredibly fun game. It's got a great B-movie aesthetic to it. It's stylized to the hilt. It knows that it's absurd. It doesn't try and play anything too seriously like, most modern horror games. It knows it's over the top, and it knows the way it's asking you to control the game is ridiculous. And then it just has a lot of fun with it. And the sort of tension you get when the enemies are ramping up and you're trying to type faster, but you start to get sloppy and then you get yourself in a muddle. It's a stress unlike anything else I've experienced in any other genre of game. It's absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. But there was also the Pokémon typing adventure game released on the DS, which was about 10 years ago now. And this came with a Bluetooth keyboard that connected to your DS system. Now, I tried to give this game a whirl because I love Pokemon, I love typing. Unfortunately, I wasn't willing to spend £300 on eBay to get a copy.
Is that how much it is
now?
That's
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, mine's in the cupboard. I should sell up.
You probably should. Now's the time to bank.
Jeez.
We did do a bit of research, but we couldn't quite get a workaround for an emulated copy of the game to work, which is a shame because I really want to try it out. So Chris, dig that out, try it, tell us how it is. But in the absence of that, we did decide to investigate some other modern typing adventure games that are out there. And we found a couple of very different games that we've given a go to have a chat about. The first is Epistory, a really lovely, beautifully woven story that Chris, I'm going to hand over to you to talk to us a little bit about.
We found Epistory by accident. I think the good thing about Steam sometimes is it will just throw up a suggestion based on other stuff you're messing around with. And this was just one of those that with a bit of research, we were like, oh, there we go. It's another typing game. I think this is a really good typing game, and it works because it's on a PC, obviously, because you have that input there. You have a keyboard in front of you. And I think there's not really much delineation anymore between console games and PC games. Generally, anything that launches on one could launch on the other, and it's almost interchangeable. But typing games are still, unfortunately, bound to a computer because generally you need to have that in front of you. What this game does really well, I think, is is it takes an established kind of genre. So it is essentially like a dungeon crawler. You could say it's got parallels to games like Bastion because it's got evolving narration. The pages or the pieces of the world unfurl as you make progress. When you're battling enemies or uncovering loot, it kind of has the same sort of rhythm as something like Bastion, especially. The way you kind of attack things, the way you clear obstacles is by typing a word or a stream of words. So if it's a tree that's fallen down, you're typing the names of trees or flora and fauna to clear those obstacles. If it's something that you need to burn through, you're typing kind of words pulled out of a thesaurus around burning and flames. The first chunk of the game is quite slow and quite easy, which I was a bit concerned about, but it does really ramp up over time. Like I'm sort of a few hours into the game now, and there's a lot of these kind of like gauntlet challenges whereby your character is fixed in place and you're battling enemies from all angles by typing words which represent each one, similar to House of the Dead. What's kind of interesting there is you have to have a strategy. You've got to look and think, okay, well, that's a much longer word at the back there that's approaching slowly. And I've got to think about, okay, well, if I take out that word, which is education or hierarchy or some like long word that's just a bit more awkward on your fingers, you can then obviously just bust out the quick ones like cat or bee without thinking when other things are much closer. And it's kind of like managing that stress level and that kind of managing the things that are coming towards you, which is quite a nice rhythm of combat. What I liked most about Epistory, though, was its control scheme. And we talked about this a little bit, me and you, Jonathan, a few days ago via text, that it's not easy to get your head round, but the developers have tried their best to repurpose your movement controls to be on the keys your hands will naturally rest on when you're typing. So you do have the option to use W, A, S, and D or use the cursor keys to get about. But you can also choose to use E and F on your left hand and I and J on your right, and they kind of work together to maneuver you in all 8 directions. And it takes a bit of time to get a feel for it, but it does then feel much more natural when you're just shifting straight to typing and back again, because your hands aren't having to make a big shift to another part of the controller. The menus as well, you can control all of those by typing the names of the options that are there. Like, again, you can use the mouse, so it's perfectly accessible, but I just like the way that you can type it. That felt more like in the spirit of the experience. This is a bit of a tangent, but I think this is a really creative way of approaching a peripheral that you're interacting with the game with. And another really good example of that, which is not a typing game, is a VR game called Static that I may have recommended to you at some point, Jonathan, because it's on PlayStation VR. But it's like a puzzle game that knows that there's going to be this disconnect between holding a regular control pad and being in a first-person VR game. So the entire thing then is based around the conceit that your hands are bound inside these little puzzle boxes, almost like giant finger traps, and every button on the controller is then operating something inside these devices. And similar to the way that the keyboard then just becomes part of your experience in Epistory, the controller is just in front of you and you stop thinking about it being something separate from the game. And I really like that. It's really clever.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's definitely worth a play. What I quite liked about Epistory as well, and the same reason I really liked Backspace Bouken and all these other games we're going to mention, is that it takes typing and uses it kind of like a modifier to adapt another genre into something different. Mm-hmm. And all the difficulty then comes from obviously your skill at typing. So if it's something that you struggle with, it's going to be harder. If it's something that you're really good at, it might be easier. But you've therefore got things like, okay, Epistory, like I said, is kind of a hack and slash game with a bit of exploration that's met this kind of typing hybrid. Typing the Dead is a rail shooter that's been repurposed and recontextualized. Backspace is obviously like a dungeon crawler that then has that popped into the first person format. And I really like this sort of additive design when people are creating games. And I think when Ben and Peyton, when you mentioned that idea of using the game jam to think of an idea and then that spiraling out into something bigger, it's almost like Kafka-esque in that it's very matter of fact when you actually play the finished product. No one says, okay, this is a typing game and it's like this. You're just in it, like Minty said, and that is the game that's around you. And I quite like that idea of just merging things together to create something that feels new and fresh and different in some way without it having like a big load of ceremony around it.
It's hard to do, but once you do it, yeah, it feels really nice.
Well, then we get a lot of situations people like are typing in attack, hit, to try and figure out what's happening. But I think it's a big difference between Backspace Bouken and these other games is like, even with Epistory, you're sort of just typing words you see that
right.
tangentially have to deal with what's happening in the environment. But in our game, you type out all the dialogue, and all the story is you either reading it on these signs or physically typing it in. And I think that's sort of where Backspace Bouken, I think, differentiates itself from other typing games that I've played, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's totally different in the way that it makes you engage with the full dialogue of the game. And like we say, Epistory is using words that are relevant in a way to the stuff that is approaching, but it doesn't feel the same as actually having to think and engage with the dialogue each time, or really think about kind of the story that it's pushing you through.
Yeah,
and that's just really nice. It's one of the many things I really liked about Backspace.
Yeah, I think again I sort of come back to that question of like why, and I think Epistory, it's lovely that it's revolving around typing, because the game is clearly made as like a love letter to the written word. Everything is made of paper, and the text, the narration is written in the scenery, and it stays there, and it's lovely. But after a while, once you know the patterns of you're typing the names of trees or the names of flowers or things a bee does or something, whatever, it starts to become mindless. You're not engaging with what you're typing. So then I think, well, why am I typing? It's no different from me just pressing A or a combo of buttons. Whereas, it was one of the things I mentioned in my reflection on Backspace was that it's the most I've engaged with dialogue in a game in terms of just processing it. Because usually, after a while, if you're playing like a big RPG, you'll zip through some of it, you'll speed read it, you'll pick out the keywords, you know what's going on, but you're not engaging with every single word, whereas you are. And the important thing is that you're then rewarded for it in Backspace because it's really good and it's really clever and there's fish puns.
I think that's where Epistory unravels for me a little, because I've only gone so far in the game, but I've got fire and ice magic, and when you're having to burn down the briars, it's all words like incinerate or inferno, all these fire-based words, and that's excellent. Same with ice, it's freeze, refrigerate. But when it comes to all the random encounters, it's just 3 and 4 letter words that are just thrown at you at random. I've killed a massive grub by typing blow and load. It just takes you out of it a little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of one of the problems I have with a lot of typing games is I am not actually the biggest fan of the typing game genre, because I think a lot of it is just, Epistory is a beautiful game. Just the art style is fantastic, but I don't know, in my opinion, typing mechanic doesn't necessarily add that much, other than it's just a different way of controlling the game. And that's sort of where typing games fall for me a lot of the time. Is just
why typing?
Don't you have to type in a word when I could, just click a button? What does it actually add?
I think that's what we went into Backspace Bouken thinking, in part because we had played so few typing games that were maybe that interesting for us. Like I said, I'd only really played Typing of the Dead. We went in with that sort of mindset, what can we actually do to make a typing game really interesting
and make typing core to the game and not just
tacked on.
That's not to say that Epistory or Typing of the Dead Overkill are bad because they're typing, not at all.
No, not at all.
Just it doesn't add necessarily anything.
I think it's a really, really good way of approaching anything creatively. It's the same as that necessity is the mother of invention. It's I haven't played a typing game that I like, so I'm going to find a way of making that work. On the total other side of the coin, we also sampled a game called the Textorcist, a retro-styled bullet hell game where you play as a renegade exorcist trying to purge the world of demonic possession through typing out prayers at them. It is absolutely insane. It's definitely a game. I would put money on the fact that the title was conceived first as a pun and then reverse engineered into a game. And it makes you type out your Hail Marys while simultaneously trying to control your character out of the way of waves of bullets, which is unlike what Epistory does, which you basically sit still, you go from moving to typing, whereas this has you doing both. And I'm going to hand over to Minty to tell you a little bit more about this one, because I thought this was a game that was painfully up your street. Am I right?
I mean, we've established now that typing is really quite an involving control scheme. particularly transcribing. It's not just sort of wiggling your thumbs and hoping for the best. Like, you're telling me to be cognizant of what's actually happening on the screen, typing it out verbatim, and also dodging projectiles in a bullet hell style gauntlet. I really like Textorcist, but the actual gameplay sections, for me, are like trying to hold the same poles of two magnets together. It's two repellent brands of ADHD that are just smashing their heads together and then getting flung to the other side of the room. The combat itself, it's remarkably on brand, though. People of faith are encouraged to pore over their holy texts, and this game really does make you feel like you're putting that same amount of work in. We're not just pressing A for a quick attack, B for a strong attack in ever increasingly complex combos. Actually typing things out like, "Behold, Damien, the legions of God that burn against you under the sword of the Archangel Michael." It's really quite gratifying when you can type all that out without getting hit by anything. The fact that your typing is contextualizing the game, that's really great as well. Really love that. Actually, thinking about it, this is what we see in Backspace as well. Like, having what you're typing be relevant to the game you're playing, the narrative and the setting. It's really, it's so elementary and so simple that I'm surprised that just having relevant words hasn't been a staple in more typing games. I feel like games that task you with just typing random words as quickly as you can reduce it to a little bit of a dick swinging contest instead of realising how thematically powerful your player inputs can be.
I think the Textorcist is definitely closer to what we wanted to do in the sense that, like you said, the words are, relevant to what's happening.
Yeah.
Textorcist was released when we were sort of halfway through, I think, development of.
Yeah, I think we became aware of both of these somewhere around like halfway through development, both Epistory and Textorcist. So we were looking at them.
The bullet hell mechanic, it's just, like you said, it's two incongruent game mechanics that are just sort of forcing together. And, it can be fun, but at the same time, it can be really frustrating.
I think what would be a more fulfilling experience is if it was a co-op game.
Ooh.
And it was played with one person controlling the character, one person typing out the prayers, and it could even be that you're fighting as a duo of exorcists. You've got one, the young renegade, Ray Bibier, I think he is in this game, and then he's partnered with like a Max von Sydow in The Exorcist type character who isn't perhaps built for physically taking on the hordes, but oh goodness, is his knowledge of the scripture second to none. And so the person on the keyboard is going to be Max von Sydow, and you're there sort of hiding behind Ray Bibier as he's like brandishing his fists, and then you're there cowering in the background with your grey hair and your Bible, getting all the words out. I think that would be a really fun experience.
Yeah, no, that sounds really fun to me.
I think, like you say, I think my main issue with this one is just the combination of genres, and that having the movement be tied to obviously using the arrow keys and having to get yourself around, or you've also got the option of holding shift and you using WAS and D. But I never felt that fluent in my typing because I kept moving my hands around. And that was, I guess, the difference to how I approached Epistory, that I quite liked having that set position for my hands, and that kind of made it all feel a bit more seamless. Whereas this one, I would basically avoid attacks for a few seconds, and then when there was a lull in projectiles, I'd just have a mad dash to try and type as many words as possible, and that didn't feel like that's what I should be doing. I felt like it really should have been that I was manoeuvring and typing at the same time, but you can't do that.
No, exactly. You physically can't do it. It's not like, say, rubbing your stomach and patting your head at the same time, where when you get the knack of it, you could do both at the same time. You physically unless you grow another hand,
Right.
Which I've tried.
It meant that I never got into that same stream. Like the stuff I enjoyed most about like playing through the final stages of Backspace Bouken was when the phrases are getting more and more complex and you're having to really, really watch and think about punctuation and everything else and longer words, you really zone in on the screen. And it's like, obviously, if you're touch typing, you're really, really trying to go as fast as possible whilst not sort of breaking that gaze. And I just couldn't do that in this game. It's like I could move around for a few seconds. I could stab out the odd letter with like one hand on my left hand, like I was, like the sort of doctors typing they do in the GPs, where it doesn't seem to matter how long they've done the job, they can't touch type, and it drives me mad. Yeah, it's smashing together two shapes that I think don't quite go together.
So back over to you, Peyton and Ben. then, are there any other typing games that you have come across that we should be on the lookout for? Or, outside of typing games, any other games in general that you'd recommend?
I know that Fishy Cactus, the people that developed Epistory, released another game, I think, late last year, Nanotale.
I think it might be early access right now, actually.
It's a beautiful game, so if you like Epistory, checking that out might be a good idea. As far as other games that I'd recommend, I recently played a game that I think came out last year called Light Matter. It's it's a puzzle game in the vein of Portal. I actually saw it on Games Done Quick. It was speedrun. A friend of ours shared the link to it, and I just watched it for 10 minutes. I was like, this game looks pretty cool. The idea is it's a Portal-like game where you're using, instead of making portals, you're using light because you can't step in the shadows because of some horrible experiment has caused shadows to become all-consuming. So you're manipulating these light sources to make it so you can get out of these different stages. And it's really an enjoyable game. If you like Portal, I really recommend Light Matter.
Mm-hmm. I second that.
Brilliant.
Just had a little look at it on Steam. It is free to try for the first hour. So no excuse not to give that a go. It does look very cool. So what does the future look like for RNG Party? Are there any more typing games in development?
As far as typing games, I think right now we have discussed a sequel, but we don't know when that would happen.
Yeah.
Right now, if we're going to release any more typing content, it would be just updates for Backspace Bouken. We really appreciate everyone who's bought it, and we really enjoyed giving it, releasing more free updates because people seem to enjoy it, and we like writing and making the art for it. So we plan on releasing more updates in the future, but nothing is in the works right at this very moment as far as more typing games.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too.
I hope we haven't come across as being really sycophantic in this episode, but I think it's the best implementation of typing I've seen in a game. And I found this first out of the three of us when I picked it up in an Indie Gala bundle, just of cheap Steam keys, and for whatever reason I thought, I'll give that one a go first. And it's rare that I'm so drawn in by the idea of something that quickly, and it's I feel quite happy that I've been able to at least pass this on to more people and kind of sing the praises of something that has really gone under the radar but deserves a much bigger audience for people that like interesting kind of weird implementations of genre.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
So I understand that you're also developing a game for a brand new console that is coming out this year, which is this lovely looking new handheld device from Panic called the Playdate, which is, it's this lovely new little thing. It's got a gorgeous high contrast black and white screen and a crank on the side of it to use as an extra control input, which is, quite interesting. And your game is called Roly Poly Adventure?
It's Polly's Roly Rumble, and it's a gyro game, sort of in the vein of Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, if anybody's ever played that game.
Unfortunately, Kirby's Tilt and Tumble came out at the tail end of the Game Boy Color's lifespan, and it didn't work on the Game Boy Advance.
Exactly.
Because you had to turn the cartridge up, so you have to plug the cartridge in the other way up or something. It's just it's a shame.
So we really like that game, and we got an opportunity to work on a handheld for once, a Playdate. So we were like, let's give it a shot. Had a gyro in it. We're all hands on deck on that game right now. So that's our main project.
They're doing an interesting setup with the distribution for the games on the Playdate, releasing them in seasons that you subscribe to, and then you get a new game downloaded onto your device every week. But yeah, it's a really exciting little project. I can't wait to see the console itself and have a play with it.
We really are enjoying developing for it. I would like to see it as well. Unfortunately, we only got one actual device.
Right, Jake has the only one.
Jake has.
He's notable by his absence.
He got it during quarantine, so we haven't been able to all get together.
Yeah.
Ben
and I haven't been able to actually play our game, really. But it's been fun doing the art in two colors, in just two colors.
It's very challenging.
Really a challenge, It's been a lot of Ben and I passing these sprites back and forth saying, "What? Can you fucking fix this?" This is a mess.
It's just so mad when you see really compressed art, very, very sort of, low bit rate. I remember when I was playing Stardew Valley, and when you see the sprites on the screen, and that's obviously dealing with a lot more colours than the Playdate does. And you think, how on earth, how do I know what emotion is on that person's face when all they've done is change the colour of 2 pixels? But somehow you do. And it's amazing like how you can convey certain shapes and certain objects with so few pixels and go, I know exactly what that is.
And the Playdate has the aspect ratio or some aspect ratio to the DS.
400 by 220, I think is this.
And I think we're making it at half.
We're doing 200 by 120 or 110 or something like that. It's a really good way to force myself to learn exactly how this really low resolution pixel art works, because we've only got 2 colors. There's only so many places they can go. So I'm basically forced to learn how people interpret that.
Yeah, it's hard too when you're making one sprite at a time without being able to see it all put together. So we're all times we're having Jake. It's like, Jake, throw this into the build and send me a picture of what it looks like.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of that.
I can't tell what this is going to look like.
Yeah,
but it's been a lot of fun developing for the Playdate. We were lucky enough to randomly be selected to get a developer and it's been fantastic. And we're just really lucky that Backspace Bouken has been successful enough for us to be able to continue having the resources to develop games. And we're just really happy with how it's turned out and appreciate all the support.
So we would like to leave you with these few words, our favourite words, in fact. If we were going to die and could only spell out one last word on Scrabble, what would it be? Ben?
Let's see. I'll pick a word from Backspace Bouken that we used. Cryovolcanism, I think.
Oh, wow.
Peyton?
Sapphire.
What a good one. Chris?
Because my day job is a teacher and I can't swear all day, I just love swearing. and because obviously this is a cross-Atlantic conversation we're having at the moment, I think a good British swear word is just wanker. It's really fun to say.
Minty?
Sausages.
My favourite word is pusillanimous.
What does that mean?
Fancy.
I think it means cowardly.
Oh, wow.
Yes, pusillanimous is cowardly. Pulchritudinous is beautiful.
Wow.
Like poultry.
Yes.
Tasty.
Also tasty. So there we have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed our collective thoughts on the most entertaining ways you can use your keyboard with both hands. Hopefully that was a wanking joke. I wrote that with the intention that I would replace it and forgot. Hopefully this has piqued your interest in some games that normally would have flown right under your ruddy radar. It has been an absolute pleasure to be joined by Peyton and Ben from RNG Games. If people want to keep up to date with what you're doing, what is the best place for them to do that?
They can join our Discord, RNG Party Games. They could also follow us on Twitter at RNG Party.
And as always, you can engage with us on our various social media channels, facebook.com/our3cents. Chat to us on there, tell us what you're playing, tell us what you think of Backspace Bouken when you've obviously gone out and bought it on Steam before this episode is even finished. You can ask us questions you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, and we'd also love to hear what your top 10 favourite video games of all time are. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitch and TikTok at O3C Podcast. I've still only posted one thing on TikTok, don't understand it. And if you search for Our 3 Cents on YouTube, you can find all of our amazing video content there. You can also reach out to us individually. I am on Twitter at Jonathan Dunn.
I am at Chaz_Hodges.
And I am Clement_Boo.
And if you're really enjoying what we're doing here at Our 3 Cents, then you can also get even more, whilst also showing us some hugely appreciated support over at patreon.com/our3cents. Loads of great perks available there, including deleted scenes and outtakes, custom artwork, access to the exclusive Discord channel, and full bonus episodes exclusive to Patreon. And please do join us next week as we kick off our 8th favourite video games of all time, starting with Chris's. So we'll see you next week for Chris's 8th favourite video game. And in the meantime, bloody enjoy your keyboards. What? This is why I write a script, because otherwise it's just nonsense.
And now a word from our sponsor. And now a word from our sponsor. And now a word from our sponsor.
Take a time machine back to before the world went to hell, around the year 2000.
The 80s and 90s were so rad. The movies, the music, the TV, the games, that's what I want to talk about.
If you're cool enough,
Join us and listen to Less Than 2000, because that's all we talk about.
Adam and Chad live less than 2000.
With a purposeful grimace and a terrible smile, join Nikki and Wyatt as we stomp our way through the history of Toho's Dai Kaiju films in Discuss All Monsters.
Are you telling me we're going to discuss all monsters?
We won't stop until there isn't a monster left to discuss. Smash that play button like Godzilla and King Kong smash an 18th century Japanese pagoda.
Only on the Greenlit Podcast Network.